We've come so far.
Hi everybody, welcome back. In today's video I want to let you know all about our trip from Toronto to Vancouver. We drove over 4,000 kilometers and it took us 2 weeks to get there. It took us that long because we decided to stop in different provincial parks along the way. As well, we decided to do car camping instead of building the tent every single time that we got to our campsites. This was much better than sleeping on a tent. After we packed everything that we need, we start our trip. Road trip! Woo-hoo! Our first stop was Killarney Provincial Park, and it took us 4 hours and a half to get there. All the provincial parks that I'm going to show you are the most popular ones around the entire country. Our campsite was located at George Lake, and this lake is humongous, so you will spend a couple of hours exploring it. Don't forget to bring your kayaks, paddleboards, or canoes, and just in case if you don't have them, you can rent them here as well. Because this park is big, we ended up staying 2 nights and 3 days. We decided to do this trip during quarantine, and for that reason the showers were closed, and the only way to kind of clean yourself was swimming on the lake.
So far, and now let go. Let the feeling take its toll. We've worked so hard, now don't you know this is music.
From this point, you can launch your boats, canoes, or kayaks, and you will reach Lake Superior. As well, here you will find one of the main hiking trails, and it will take almost 3 hours to complete the entire loop. There is another trail beside the beach, and this one is pretty interesting because here you can do backpacking, and it will take between 7 to 10 days to complete the entire loop. But we just walked for an hour and then headed back to our campsite. The next morning we woke up and packed everything up and continued driving to our next campsite. It took us 10 hours to get there because we had to stop a few times. We get there at 7 p.m. and immediately decided to go to the lake and swim just to clean up a little bit. Surprisingly, this lake still is part of Lake Superior, and that was very shocking because we didn't know that it was that big. The next morning we woke up very early, so we were able to explore a little more of this park. We wanted to have a short and quick hike in order to continue driving to our next campsite. Our next destination was Huron Provincial Park, and in order to get there we had to drive for 6.5 hours. But along the way we ended up finding this gorgeous waterfall, and we stayed there for maybe half an hour checking it out. After driving a couple of hours, we finally reached our destination, which was Huron Provincial Park. We chose this park because it was located very close to the border with Manitoba. When we arrived to this park, it was 8 p.m. and rainy, so we didn't do much here other than eat and immediately fall asleep because at this point we were quite tired of driving for such a long hours. The next morning we continue our driving and finally we reach Manitoba. A very interesting fact is that it took us more than 20 hours to cross the entire Ontario province. We're just putting a little bit of gas in Manitoba, and basically here we are not camping at all because they don't allow you. If you are going to stay in Manitoba for 1 day or even more, you have to self-quarantine for 14 days. So that's why we are just passing by. It will take us around 6 hours to cross the entire province. As soon as we reach Manitoba, we notice how fast the scenery changed, and here you will notice that everything is completely flat, and you will see that for kilometers ahead. So it was quite shocking and beautiful at the same time. Now, we had to drive a total of 8 hours in order to reach our campsite that was located in Saskatchewan. This campsite was amazing because we had to pay $32 per night, and it was fancy comparing with other ones that we have been in. Something important that you have to know is that they give you free wood and you can grab as much as you want of it. Something interesting about Saskatchewan is that they have completely different rules about COVID-19. In fact, they were the only ones who kept the showers in provincial parks open, and finally here we were able to properly shower, so that was very nice of them. As well, the prices of every provincial park are much cheaper than Ontario, and as I mentioned before, they give you free wood and you pretty much can use as much as you want. We were so shocked about this park because it had a baseball and golf course, mini golf, a drive-in theater, a laundry room that was very big. Even though it's a camping area, it felt more like a small town. By the way, we just stayed 1 night here.
Showing off, don't wanna have to wait tonight. Better off, I'm gonna find my way tonight. Wait tonight. Won't you talk to me? I wanna heal your sorrows. We'll make a new tomorrow. One night to find the answer. What makes this heart beat faster?
The next morning we woke up extremely early because we had to drive for 12 hours in order to get to Banff, located in Alberta. Now, this is a big recommendation, I hope you follow it. Try to drive during the day because at night the highway does not have any type of lights and it's extremely dark. At the same time, in the majority of areas that you are going to pass through, there is no phone signal, and if something bad happened or your car broke down or whatever, it is very difficult to find help. Now, during the day you will see a lot of cars that maybe will stop and help you, but at night it could be very difficult, and as you can see in the video, there are not too many houses and towns nearby. For that reason, it's better driving during the day. Passing through Saskatchewan, we stopped in 2 main attractions. One was the Moraine Lake, and here you will see a lot of birds. This is located just beside the highway. After driving for a while and passing several farms, we finally reached our second spot, which is the Great Sand Hills. And this place is located close to the border with Alberta. By the way, you don't have to pay anything in order to access this place. We kept driving for a while until we reached Alberta. A very interesting fact is that just before arriving to Calgary, the land is very flat. And as soon as you pass Calgary, you will start seeing these big mountains. From the city of Calgary, we drove 1.5 hours in order to reach Banff, and here's where our campsite was located. Banff is one of the most touristic areas in Alberta, and in order to access to this humongous national park, you need to pay a daily fee, or better yet, a year pass. The pass allows you to visit hiking trails, mountains, and lakes. We ended up buying the year pass because it was cheaper, and that allowed us to enter to other national parks around Canada as well, and because we stay 4 days here. If you're just driving through the park, you don't need to purchase the pass. And after driving several hours from Saskatchewan to Alberta, we finally got to our campsite located here in Banff. The park rules were very strict and they didn't allow us to keep any type of food inside of the tent or on top of the table if we were not present on the campground. The reason of this is because there are so many animals that get attracted to the scents, and there was a high alert for grizzly and black bears. And if you didn't follow the rules, they banned you right away from the campground. If you want to make fire, you need to buy a fire permit that costs $8 or $10, I don't remember exactly, and that allows you to grab as much wood as you want for all the days that you're going to be camping there. Close to our campsite, we had two beautiful lakes. This one is called Two Jack Lake, and it was located 5 minutes away from our campsite. So something that you need to know is that in general, the water here is extremely cold and it is quite painful swimming here. We tried to do it and we couldn't resist being more than a minute inside of the water. That's why you will not see too many people swimming. You will see a lot of people on kayaks, paddle boards or canoes, because it is very painful to stay inside of the water. From Two Jack Lake, we drove 5 more minutes until we reached Lake Minnewanka. This lake is massive. Here you will find boat cruise, boat rental, and guided fishing, hiking trails, and even a snack bar. Early in the morning, we drove towards Lake St. Louis, which is one of the most popular lakes in this national park. It took us 40 minutes to reach this point from downtown Banff. We arrived there before 8 a.m. At that time, the parking lot was completely packed. They told us that it's better go super early before 8 or after 6 p.m. Along the highway, you will find these bridges which were designed for animals and they can cross safely. As well, you will find different trails that you can take and hike for hours. By the way, there is a small villa before arriving to Lake Louise, and here I recommend you to go to the visitor center and of course obtain one of the maps so you have a clear idea of all the activities that you can do around that area. If not, you just drive 5 more minutes from the villa and then finally you will reach the lake. From the parking lot, you just have to walk 5 minutes and you will see this beautiful lake. Just in case, you don't have to pay any type of entry fee in order to access to this lake because you already pay for the daily pass or the year pass that I showed you before. If you want to kayak on the lake, you have to pay over $100 for 1 hour. So if you have the money and you want to do it, of course you can do it. As well, there are different hiking trails that you can take and spend the day there. In the afternoon, we head back to downtown Banff. There were several restaurants, hotels, and different activities to do. Once again, I recommend you to go to the visitor center and they will give you a map and you will know exactly what you can do around this area. The next morning we visit Lake Monier, which is close to Lake Louise. From the main highway you had to drive for 11 kilometers up to the mountain in order to get here. To get here it's very difficult because the parking is small and they don't allow too many cars. So we decided to walk. It was 11 kilometers, but thankfully we were hitchhiking and somebody picked us up.
Parking lot fills up at 7 a.m. according to what they told us. We came here at 8 and it was full. So it's actually true.
Yep. Just in case, you can rent a canoe and that costs $100, but you can fit 3 people inside of the canoe. As well, there are different trails that you can take. The view is just fantastic and breathtaking.
don't know what you've been through. I guess you're back. Are you gonna tell me where you went? All the messages I sent with no reply. It's like that. You're just gonna walk into my room. I hate how you assume I could walk for days.
As a quick tip, always check the difficulty level of each hiking trail, as well as how many kilometers and how long it's going to take you to complete that trail. If it says that it's difficult, trust me, it's going to be very difficult. Always be mindful of your capacity and how much your body can handle. As well, there are other hiking trails that require to have a minimum of 4 people in order to access them. And the reason of this is because there is a high alert for grizzly bears or black bears. So try to follow the directions and you will be fine. The next morning we decided to hike in Ha Ling Peak, which is located 42 minutes from Banff in this big town called Canmore. This was one of the hardest hikes that I ever done in my entire life. That's why I told you always check the difficulty level of each hiking trail. And we thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be super easy. It's just 3.3 kilometers. We're going to be fine. But holy smoke, you have no idea how hard it was, to the point that our legs were shaking. We couldn't even breathe in some point. It was very, very tough. We took like 3 hours to get to the top. It was so satisfying, but very, very hard. Believe it or not, the easy way to go down is by running. I know that that sounds insane, but that helped us to avoid a lot of pain in our legs. In some areas we were just walking and our legs were so tired that they kept shaking. It was horrible. And by doing this, we just took 45 minutes until we reached the bottom. The next morning we packed everything up to continue our road trip. This time we moved to Jasper National Park, located 3.5 hours away from Banff. Along the highway you will find this place where you can purchase the car pass. In our case we just showed the one that we purchased in Banff that covered the entrance for this national park as well. Now I want to make one of the biggest recommendations for this road trip. Make sure to keep your gas tank full and try to fill it up every time that is half empty. The reason of this is because in a lot of areas that you're going to pass through, there is nothing around. Some gas stations have signs that tells you that that is your last opportunity to put gas because in 150 kilometers you will not find anything at all, and that was true. An hour before arriving to downtown Jasper, we make a quick stop in Athabasca Glacier. Here you can take a few hiking trails and explore this gorgeous place. By the way, you don't have to pay additional fee in order to access it because it is covered when you buy the car pass. Another wonderful place to visit is Athabasca Waterfalls, and this is located 30 minutes away from downtown Jasper. Finally, we arrived to the little town of Jasper and immediately went to the visitor center to request a map in order to see all the activities that they recommended to do here. By the way, we just stayed one night here because we wanted to continue our road trip to Vancouver. The next morning we got ready and continued our driving towards Kamloops. This is located in British Columbia and it took us 4.5 hours in order to reach this point. When we reached British Columbia, we were not able to find any campsite here because they were completely packed, and even when we tried to camp in a private trailer park, they didn't allow us to stay there because the washrooms were closed because COVID-19, and they allowed all the RVs because they have their own bathrooms, but tent camping or car camping, it was pretty much impossible to find a place there. That's why we ended up staying in a hotel in Kamloops. The next day, we left the hotel at 6 in the morning in order to drive towards Vancouver. It took us almost 4 hours to get there, and our first stop was Stanley Park, which is a humongous park located on the border with downtown Vancouver. Now, as a quick tip, if you are driving something bigger like an RV, parking at Stanley Park is the best option for you because there is a lot of space and it's cheaper. It cost us less than $15 for the entire day. If you are going to explore the park, I recommend you to bring your bicycle because it's going to be easier and faster to explore all of it. At some point, we ended up leaving Stanley Park and kept biking towards downtown Vancouver to find something to eat. Now, for us, downtown Vancouver wasn't like super shocking or crazy because, to be honest, it's very similar to downtown Toronto. Now, I don't know why this happened, but our main idea was staying in downtown Vancouver for 2 or 3 days. But after spending a couple of hours there, we head back to our car, and at that point, we just look at each other and it was like, hey, like, I don't want to stay in the city anymore. What if we just head back to any campground? Because it was Saturday, all the campgrounds nearby were full. Our only option was head back to Kamloops and stay the night in a hotel there. At this point, it was 2 weeks since we started our trip and we just decided to head back home. Now, we just took 4 days to head back, and I do not recommend you to do it in that short period of time. The reason of this is because we ended up driving for 12 or 14 hours per day, and that was brutal for our body. It was very tiring pretty much. So don't do it. Take your time, and maybe every 6 hours or maybe 7 hours driving per day is okay, but more than that, it's bad, so don't do it. Okay, so the next morning we ended up driving from Kamloops to Calgary, and it took us 9 hours to get there. In Calgary, we just stayed one night in a hotel, and that's it. From Calgary, we drove 10 hours until we reached our campsite in Saskatchewan and stayed there for one night. And then the next morning, we drove for 12 hours from Saskatchewan until we reached our campsite in Ontario. I want to make a big recommendation for this entire road trip, and always try to add 1 or 2 hours to your driving time. The reason of this is because, of course, you're going to stop just to put gas, to go to the bathroom, buy food, or simply take pictures of the scenery. And if you're driving for a very long time and you are going to arrive to your destination in the late afternoon, you don't want to drive at night because it's very, very dark and there is no lights along the highway. There are a lot of animals along the way that try to pass the highway, and of course you don't want to kill them or get into an accident. When we got to Kalabeka Falls, it was almost 8 p.m. That's why immediately we went for a hike before it got dark. The next morning we drove to Sleeping Giant, which is located an hour and a half from Kalabeka Falls. It was rainy the day that we arrived, but we couldn't resist going for a hike and we got very wet, but it was totally worth it. We ended up hiking for 14 kilometers. Once again, I wanna recommend you to check the difficulty level of each hiking trail. Don't be fooled if it says that it's maybe 1 kilometer hike in a difficult level trail. Trust me, it's going to be very hard. We ended up hiking in the Head Trail, and this one is one of the steepest hiking trails in the entire park. By the way, it has just 1.4 kilometers to hike, but the difficulty level is very high. It was very hard to reach the top, but so satisfying when we finally were able to see the lake, so I totally recommend you to do it. After the hike, we went to the lake to swim for a little while, and yep, the water was very cold. And after that, we went to our campsite to rest for the night. The next morning, we continued our driving, and this time we were moving towards Pancake Lake. So 1 hour into our driving, the tire exploded, and here we didn't have any type of phone signal and we couldn't call anybody. Thankfully, we brought with us all the tools necessary to change any type of tire. So this is another big recommendation. Always bring as many tools as you can imagine, because these things can happen. After replacing the tire, we kept going and stopped in different areas along the highway that were very nice to see. After 6 p.m. we arrived to Pancake Lake, and when we were looking for places to sleep, this provincial park was a little bit underrated because it's located beside the highway, but I totally recommend you to go because it was gorgeous. More than anything, the beach and the lake were humongous, and it was just amazing to be there. The next morning we packed everything up to continue our driving towards Groundy Lake. This was the last provincial park that we were going to stay at before getting home. Now I'm almost done with this video, and I want to let you know that we took 19 days and more than 10,000 kilometers driving in order to complete this entire road trip. If you're planning to do something similar, do it during summer and take more time to truly enjoy the scenery and nature of each provincial park. This was a wonderful experience and I totally recommend you to do it. And this this is the video for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, don't forget to put them below, and don't forget to subscribe and share this video. See you soon. Bye.